The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, thank you everybody for joining us once again. This is another entry in the AWP Community of Practice webinar series. Today we're joined by Josh Girvin from O3 Solutions. Josh and team from O3 hosted a virtual event. It was a kind of a combined seminar or workshop type of event on May 4th to present the AWPXChange focused on digital transformation and advanced work packaging. So today's session is actually going to be sort of a recap with kind of all the learnings from that session, and a great opportunity for you, of course, to ask questions and learn a little bit more about that event and about AWP digital transformation going forward from O3 Solutions, which of course is an expert in this space. So next slide, please, Josh, and thanks for joining us today and presenting this. Again, I mentioned this is part of the AWP Community of Practice webinar series. The webinar series is a free to attend series of presentations, workshops. It's been virtual events, of course, throughout 2020 and now 2021, but they're helping to promote the mission and vision of the AWP COP, which is to create connections and share knowledge for the advancement of project performance best practices worldwide. So again, we do thank you for joining us for another one of these events, and we hope that you're learning a lot and still enjoying the sessions. Next slide, please. We encourage you to look for a chapter in your region, by the way. The CII Contract Strategy Virtual Summit is a premium event available to everybody, including the AWP Community of Practice. It's an official Construction Industry Institute virtual event. It's their first ever event focused completely on contract strategy. So traditional and collaborative contracting as it relates to the owner, the contractor, the suppliers, and their consultants that they work with. Attendance is only $249, and you can find more information at the URL on screen, or just go to awpconference.com. This event was rescheduled recently. It's now June 28th and 29th, 2021. So we're about 1 month away, and we hope that you will take some time to visit the website, learn what it's all about, and join us in about a month's time for that event. Next slide, please. Some additional upcoming events in 2021, and in September 28th and 29th, the Construction Industry Institute presents another official CII virtual event. This one, AWP and Lean Better Together. So it's the combination of the AWP and Lean principles and practices, and how they can be integrated to better support project performance on any project. And the AWP Conference 2021 Houston, which is presented by Group ASI with the support of CII and the COAA out of Alberta, Canada, is our first physical in-person event since 2020, actually since 2019. So we're very excited to be bringing that event back to Houston. It's been an annual event since 2014 in Houston, and since 2009. When we first started it in Canada. So looking forward to seeing everybody there. It will be a hybrid event, so we'll have a virtual component for those who are as yet unable to attend an in-person event, but again, we hope you can make it. And every event will be posted to awpconference.com. Finally, AWP University is presenting in partnership with Group ASI limited time series of 2-day AWP and WFP certification jumpstart courses. If you are interested in AWP and WFP certification and would like to kind of dip your toe, I guess you could say, in that process and then see if it's for you, we encourage you to check out one of these 2-day courses. The price is very low for this series, and it won't stay low forever. And so we just wanted to help AWP University spread the word that those courses are available now. There's courses happening as early as next week, so check out awpconference.com or awp-u.com. Without further ado, I'd like to pass it over to Josh Girvin to present the AWPXChange recap webinar. So all yours, Josh. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Stephen. So as Stephen mentioned, purpose of today is to provide a recap on the AWPXChange. We'll be talking about some case studies that some clients provided, as well as a technology roadmap discussion and a workshop that we hosted to collect input on the technology landscape from an AWP perspective. Before we jump into that, a quick safety moment, and this is on cybersecurity safety, and just some simple things to keep in mind. It's RISK, R-I-S-K, is a simple acronym to remember. R stands for running updates, so make sure you run updates on your phone or computers. Make sure you are constantly updating to make sure you have the most up-to-date operating system and patches from a security perspective. Initiate connections, so avoid automatically connecting to Wi-Fi networks or other connections, so don't have it set to automatically connect. Make sure you intentionally connect, so you initiate or intentionally connect when you are connecting your device to other devices. Simplify your browsing, so stay away from questionable content, clicking on links that take you to questionable websites or unsafe websites. And then K for keep passwords secure, so safeguard those passwords, update them regularly, diversify them across accounts. I personally recommend using a password device like a LastPass or one of those that allows you to use really complicated passwords without having to keep up with those. So just some things to keep in mind. It is a significant opportunity for security risk. You can see 160 million individuals affected by data exposures in 2020 alone. So just remember RISK, R-I-S-K. With that, a little introduction on myself. My name is Josh Girvin. I'm the CEO of O3, highly involved in the industry from a CII perspective, a leadership team for the CII AWP Community for Business Advancement, as well as the founding co-chair for the Performance and Benchmarking Committee, and now serving as the current co-chair for the Scaffolding Joint Working Group. From a call to action perspective, if you are a CII member and are interested in participating in either of those committees, we'd love to have your involvement. Performance and benchmarking is focused on ROI calculators for the industry, and Scaffolding Joint Working Group is developing a set of best practices with regards to AWP and scaffolding and access management. So if you're interested in either of those, please reach out. We'd love to have your participation in the committees. Before we talk about AWPXChange specifically, a little introduction on O3. We are a modern web-based software solution focused specifically on advanced work packaging. So it's a platform technology that was developed specifically around advanced work packaging. We're not a solution that's been developed for other best practices and then merging or trying to incorporate AWP, built from the very beginning, focused on advanced work packaging. Our clients are roughly 50-50 split between owners and EPCs, with also a smattering of construction contractors as well. They range from very large projects, so some of the largest projects in the world with thousands of users on giga projects, down to portfolios of small cap projects with TICs, individual TICs as low as $50,000. So the tool, just like AWP, is highly scalable to the world's largest projects down to very small brownfield small cap projects as well. Those projects, O3 is globally deployed with lots of owners and contractors, EPC firms and projects everywhere, and is battle tested with thousands of users in the field. When we talk about the solution, O3 itself is a platform solution that goes across the entire life cycle of a project. We'll go into this in more detail. But we have a number of AWP solutions starting from the front-end planning side with on-plan, on-design, which is AWP for the detailed design phase of the project, on-build, which is for construction execution, or you may call it WorkFace planning, and then on-start, which focuses on startup and commissioning, and then a number of mobile solutions that extend that functionality out into the field. So that's a little bit on O3. Now I want to jump in and talk about the AWPXChange event itself. Which is really about digital transformation and advanced work packaging and how those two things come together. The purpose of this event really was to host a conference that was focused on AWP technology. So there are a lot of great conferences out there. Obviously, ASI, who's hosting this webinar, does an amazing conference on AWP, but a lot of that is focused on process or contracting, like we talked about. A lot of components to AWP that are super important and that you need to have in place, but technology tends to be a small subset of that. And so we wanted to host an event that was specifically focused on technology because we think that's an important component to successful implementation of AWP. So this event was a technology-focused event, and it's important to note that this wasn't just an O3-focused event. There are other technology providers, partners, and even some competitors to O3 that participated in this event. It was open to lots of technology providers because it's important that we have this discussion be larger than just O3. It's about moving the industry forward from an AWP technology perspective. So some of the outcomes that we expected to get out of this event were a better understanding from the industry about where technology is today, and then have a discussion about where that technology needs to go. So from what we wanted to accomplish, we really wanted to have an open conversation about where technology needs to go, and then to share those results with the participants, not only O3 and prospective users of O3, but other technology providers, because some of the outcomes or opportunities for expansion are not things that O3 is in a position to solve. Other solution providers need to solve those issues. So it really was about an industry level conversation about advancing AWP technology. From an agenda perspective, the event included 3 case studies from folks using AWP and O3, Shell, Suncor, and Linde. And the intent there was to share some of their experiences about their AWP journeys. And then we had a product innovation discussion and technology roadmap session where O3 shared its view of the state of the technology, AWP technology, as well as where O3 believes that the industry needs to go. And then we incorporated some participation, some feedback, some input from the folks participating in the exchange to have a conversation about where we collectively feel the industry needs to go. And then lastly, had what we called an inspiration and innovation interactive workshop, which was more an open-ended conversation that started with brainstorming around what are the challenges that are holding technology back in AWP, and then prioritizing some of those challenges, and then having a conversation or brainstorming around what are some of the potential solutions to those challenges. So an interactive session using some online tools to come up with first some prioritized challenges and then some potential solutions from an AWP technology perspective. And again, larger than O3. Some of those things aren't things that O3 can or is in a position to address. It's more about the technology industry around AWP in general. We started out by doing a process of understanding where the audience is in terms of their AWP journey. So if you think of the AWP journey from just getting started to ending up with AWP being a corporate best practice, we did a pre-event survey and then also actually a live survey. So we did a pre-event which captured from the registrant's perspective where the level of AWP maturity is, and then we also did it live in the event. Here you can see the results from the pre-event survey, and not unsurprisingly, a lot of folks in the just getting started. So roughly a third of the folks registering the event were just getting started, with a quarter or so having done work in WorkFace planning, a quarter having done it in more of an AWP perspective, and then 12% showing it as a corporate best practice. So this aligns with what we see in the industry, which is there are a lot of folks who are just getting started in their AWP journey, and we saw similar results for the folks that actually attended the event as well. So the first part of the day, we started with some case studies from leading owners and EPCs that are leveraging AWP. We'll go through those at a high level, some of the things that we learned from those from Shell, Suncor, and Linde. The first of those case studies was titled From Skeptic to Believer, Scaling AWP One Step at a Time. And that was actually provided by Noah Smithwick, who is a project engineer and AWP implementation lead at Shell's Gulf of Mexico deep water portfolio. So this is all of the Gulf of Mexico deep water assets. So it's about 8 assets that are leveraging AWP both for their capital projects as well as their small cap projects as well. So they have embraced AWP as a programmatic approach to managing their projects, large and small. But that was a journey. It didn't start from embracing all at once. It started with a crawl, walk, run approach. And so some of the key takeaways from Noah's presentation, it's really important to embrace a crawl, walk, run approach. So in this specific example, they started with a single pilot project with a limited scope from an AWP best practices perspective, focusing on installation work packages, and in fact, non-graphical installation work packages, the development and managers of those packages, as well as constraint management. And then they grew both the level of AWP best practices as well as the level of technology adoption as they scaled their along their AWP journey. They also scaled from an individual project to now, as I mentioned, managing an entire portfolio of projects, leveraging both AWP and technology. So some of the key takeaways that Noah stressed in his presentation: right-sizing the technology to your rollout. So using the technology and the best practices, making sure that maps with your journey as you extend your AWP maturity. Understanding what technology is available for each project phase. You can see here it's in a little bit of small writing, so probably difficult to see, but you can see some of the practices, the AWP best practices that they implemented along the different phases of their project. They use the terminology select, define, execute within Shell. Others may use concept, slightly different terminology, but you can see where what levels of AWP best practices they implemented where in their projects, and then the technology that they leveraged to align with that. Another key takeaway from Noah's presentation was the importance of setting goals and measuring against those goals. So making sure you have an intentional plan of where you want to be from an AWP perspective, then measuring your progress against that. Another key takeaway that Noah had was the importance of making sure that your process and technology are aligned. So there are some folks who believe that you need to spend years focusing just on process and get process perfect and then go and implement technology. Noah made a strong case against that, which is that you don't want to go through change management twice. You don't want to make a change for process and then make another change for technology. And further, the technology helps you better understand the holes in your process. So by implementing that technology, by going through the process of implementing both your AWP process and your AWP technology at the same time, it, in Noah's words, forces you to answer some tough questions. So one example that he brought up was around the approval process for release of packages, and when they were looking at that, they said, okay, well, who's involved in this approval? And the answer, well, it depends, or it's open-ended, or it's manual. Well, that doesn't work. As you're introducing technology, you need to think it through and have rules, logic that drives that process when you're leveraging technology. So it forces you to ask and answer some tough questions that identify some holes or inefficiencies in your process that then improve your process. So another key takeaway for him was don't do a double change management process, implement your technology and process change at the same time. The next case study was from Suncor, and this was around the transformation journeys. So digitization and AWP coming together at the same time. This was presented by Dylan Riley, who's the construction manager on a Suncor mega project, and he spoke about their digitization journey as well as the implementation of AWP. A couple of key takeaways there. One was that if you ask someone within your organization what it means to have a digital project or to be on a digitization journey, or what AWP means to that project, you're going to get different answers, and that's within one organization. And then if you think about a project that has all these different organizations involved and different stakeholders, you're going to get lots of different opinions on what that means. And so having a clear definition and standardization around what that means is really critical to success. Another key takeaway that he had was that AWP can help your process of digitization because it provides this framework for better planning that can be done in a digital format. So it helps you by incorporating AWP. It actually helps you to make some of this this digital transformation. And then third point that was interesting was that if we're not embracing technology and not introducing technology as an industry, we're going to be in trouble, because the younger generation of employees, those folks that are newly out of college or coming out of college today, they want to work in industries that embrace digital tech, a digital approach and embrace technology. And as an industry, we're going to lose out if we don't grow and embrace technology. So Dylan also walked through Suncor's journey and some of the kind of key things that came out of that. You can see the old approach to the new approach here, starting with a mixture of tools and moving to an integrated system, going from document-centric to a data-centric approach, getting out of multiple systems with lots of spreadsheets and little to no integration or point-to-point integration, and moving to a hub approach where they're connecting information across systems into a centralized hub, which allows them to get out of a really manual and error-prone process to introduce more efficiency and automation, as well as get out of this state of multiple versions of the truth of information and get into a version control and understanding what systems are the systems of record for what information, and having a connected or combined environment where all that information comes together that allows you to do things like version controlling and having alerts and notifications associated with that and change management. So really interesting story from Suncor around their digital journey and how AWP has helped them to drive that digital journey as well. The third case study was around the integrated EPC planning and execution with end in mind, and this was done by Linda and specifically Eric Leimer, the project director on a mega project in Singapore. And he shared a number of key learnings that came out of his presentation. One was when you're talking about the AWP methodology, you want to leverage the standards and the best practices that have been in place from both from a principle or process perspective, but then also the terminology. So he recommends sticking to that CII, COA, those industry terms and approach, because that allows you to have a more standard approach and to drive and reduce that change management challenge within your organization, as well as your partner organizations that are part of that project delivery. Another key takeaway was starting early in the process. So in the concept or feed phases of the project, it's important to have AWP in place. It's critical for that as part of the path of construction development. So leveraging those AWP best practices early for setting up that project for success. So integrating the EPC concept schedule, for example, using the path of construction development process and creating this foundation for AWP execution later in the project. So as it comes to AWP, you can never start too early in a project. The earlier you start, the better your opportunities are for value and success from an AWP perspective throughout the life of the project. During EP execution itself, they've found a lot of value around the definition and tracking of EWPs and PWPs, so you're leveraging technology for defining and managing and tracking those EWPs and PWPs, as well as constraint management. So a lot of people think about constraint management as a process that you use during construction execution for installation work packages, but in reality, constraint management is something that goes against all package types. So that includes engineering and procurement packages. All packages have constraints that can prevent them from being executed efficiently, and so managing those in an intentional way using technology is important. Having a holistic view of the supply chain from a purchasing perspective, and then having a disciplined and controlled CDP release process for handoff to construction were all kind of key things that came out of their learnings through this project. And then lastly, in the WorkFace planning, having clear visibility, transparency around the constraints and the releasability of those packages so that you can be proactive in mitigating any issues, leveraging a common platform so you can have shared visibility across all the stakeholders, being able to leverage the 3D construction, virtual construction model so that you can do graphical work packaging to decrease the amount of effort and the amount of time necessary to create this and scope those installation work packages. And in order to get that virtual construction model in place, you need to have a data set. There's engineering data you need to pull in, there's fabrication data you need to pull in. And so having those data requirements set early and included as contractual exhibits in the purchase orders and subcontracts is important. If you don't have access to that data, it's challenged to introduce that automation, and it's difficult to get access to that data if you don't build it into the contract. So just some key learnings there, and that's another thing that happens early in the AWP setup for success phases, the early phases of the project, the contractual setup and ensuring that you have those data requirements built in is key. So those were a couple of the case studies, the 3 case studies that we went through where clients of O3 shared their journey, and it really wasn't focused on O3, it was focused on their AWP journey and lessons learned from their AWP journeys that other people can leverage, hopefully, as they are progressing through their own AWP journeys as well. The next phase of the AWPXChange moved into what we called the Product Innovation and AWP Technology Roadmap session. And really the purpose of this session was for O3 to share its view on where AWP technology is today and where the opportunities are for technology expansion. And so we did that by talking through our view of the AWP journey, our view of the AWP technology landscape, where O3 sits today, and then where we think things are going to go from a product roadmap perspective. And then we collected some input from those people participating specifically around mobility solutions. So the first thing that we talked through was how O3 views the AWP journey. You can see on the y-axis in this graph is AWP maturity, and on the x-axis you have phases of technology or use or levels of technology involvement that map to that kind of AWP maturity. So in the getting started phase, the introduction of constraint management is a really easy way to get value and early on introduce AWP best practices on a low level of maturity. This is something that people are doing today. You are managing constraints on your project. You just may not be doing it well or with intention or with tools that are helping you to do that efficiently. The next level of AWP maturity is what we call entry-level work packaging, and that's where you're creating packages, but you're not leveraging a 3D model or other kind of data sets that allow you to automate that. But there's real value in intentionally creating packages and managing those packages inside of a digital environment, even if you're not leveraging some of the data for the automation and be able to drive that and make that more efficient. But getting an intentional package in place, releasing that package constraint-free to the field, even if there's paper involved with executing that package out in the field, there's real value in having that intentional planning process in place. The next level of AWP maturity is what we call data-driven work packaging, and that's where now we're consuming things like it could be a virtual construction model, it could be other fabrication data, it could be automation and integration with other systems for constraint management like materials management or document management, those types of things. Now you're getting into more automation. This is more mature of an approach, and there's value associated with that. You're making both the WorkFace planner's job and the constraint management process more efficient. So there's as you scale that maturity, you get not only the value of the packaging and the releasing of constraint-free packages to the field, but you get a more efficient creation and management process. And then the last phase in that AWP maturity we talked about was AWP program management. And that's where you're moving beyond kind of managing a single project with an AWP to managing a program, scaling that AWP across a portfolio or an enterprise. And that's that kind of final level of AWP maturity. It's important to mention that when we talk about packaging here, we're not talking about just installation work packages. As you grow the maturity within different stakeholders in your organization, you're going to see that same kind of maturity growth for engineering packages or procurement packages. You need to kind of look at each of those packages and the growth of those inside those organizations. They can take a similar path as you scale the AWP maturity within any organization or within any division of your organization. So there's sometimes multiple kind of AWP journeys to scale within those various groups on a project. Another thing we talked about was aligning technology with your journey. So not waiting for the process to be perfect before applying technology. There are consultants out there that'll tell you, hey, pay us for 3 years to build the perfect process and don't worry about technology. That is not an efficient way to go about it. It's important to introduce the technology with process, otherwise you go through a double change management. You're going to do a process and then you're going to try to apply a technology, and now you got to do change management again, which is going to be taxing on your resources and slow down the ability to realize value. The other key part is that you want to get value where you are. You don't want it to be a theoretical, consulting exercise for 3 years where you're spending money and not getting value. You want to get value immediately. So start small, get in place with the early introduction of technology and process and get value there, get the quick win, and then expand on that and grow over time. And as long as you select a technology that can grow with you, then you're not going to have double change management, and you're going to have the ability to capture value throughout your journey. So it's going to start value sooner, it's going to get you to max value faster, and overall it's just a much more efficient process. And as Noah pointed out in his presentation, the technology helps you uncover parts of the process that can be improved. It forces you to answer some of those tough questions. So the AWP journey is something that we think is really important, that you take an intentional approach to that, and that you scale both your process and technology as you grow. The next thing we talked about was the AWP technology landscape. And so if you think about where the industry is today, if we simplify a project into these kind of 4 phases, and we think about the standard project tools that you see on a project, there are a number of tools that we see throughout the life of the projects, things like scheduling and document management. You have estimating that you use early in the project, work in progress, document management during the design phase. You have design tools, procurement of materials solutions, completion solutions. Obviously, this is not an exhaustive list of all the tools that you see on a project, but this is meant to be a representative list of kind of what tools you see and where they're used in which phases of the project. If you think then not about standard project tools, but about AWP tools, you have constraint management that goes across the life cycle of the project, AWP for front-end planning, AWP for engineering and procurement, WorkFace planning, AWP for commissioning and startup, and then AWP reporting. You'll notice that only one of these areas is marked green, and that's WorkFace planning. And that's actually intentional. It's intentional because that's where the industry is today. If you look at most projects, they'll have a solution around WorkFace planning, but then when it comes to AWP technology, there's a lot of Excel, there's a lot of spreadsheets, there's a lot of Access databases, there's a lot of one-off Power BI solutions to try to provide reporting. It's a smattering of Band-Aids and bubble gum and duct tape, connecting all these disparate systems, trying to provide AWP across the project lifecycle. And we from O3 think that's a real issue. So when we think about the way that we should be doing this, is that if you think about the AWP tools across the project lifecycle, you should have intentional digital solutions across all of these phases of the project. So from an O3 perspective, we have on plan from the front end planning, on design for detailed design, on build for the construction phase, and on start for commissioning and startup. And that's, we have a set of solutions. We have work packages, 10 work package types out of the box inside of O3 that go in each of those phases of the project, the work packages that align with each of those phases, as well as the activities that you need to be doing for ensuring AWP success. On the front end side, it's things like setting up your coding structure, your best practice measurement, your master index managements for AWP. Those things shouldn't be happening in Excel and Access and Power BI. You need an intentional solution that's built for managing AWP across the life cycle of the project. And that's why O3 has broken up its solutions, or what some people might call modules, to map to those phases of the project. In addition to that, O3 AWP health and adoption and outcomes reporting. So a set of defined measurements that map to the best practices you've defined inside the tool to help you understand whether or not AWP is actually being adopted on the project, and whether or not you're realizing the outcomes associated with those best practices, the expected outcomes from an AWP perspective. And then, of course, constraint management that goes across the entire life cycle of the project. So constraint management isn't just an installation work package activity. If you're doing constraint management correctly, it goes across all your package types, and not just packages, it goes across lots of entities throughout the whole life cycle of the project. And you need to have that be not in a bunch of different Excel sheets or emails or text messages, but in a collaborative SaaS solution where we can have clear visibility and accountability and transparency into the owners of those constraints, the due dates of those constraints, and reporting on whether or not those constraints are being completed, the ability to flag issues. That's true constraint management. It's not a checklist of did these things get done. It's a proactive management solution to allow you to mitigate those constraints so you can be productive. That's the key. So we need to get away from kind of checklists and into real constraint management. So where is it O3 today from a packaging view? We think work packaging goes from the entire project lifecycle, from concept through commissioning. And when we talk about packages, that means the creation of those packages and tracking of those packages. So creation is about scoping, so defining the scope of that package, and then scheduling and sequencing those packages, having real-time status visualization, whether that's 3D visualization in a geospatial context, or that's visualization in a Gantt view, or whether that's visualization from a reporting perspective. You need to have real-time status visualization. constraint and approval management. So it's not just scoping a package and then saying, okay, let me hand this package out and someone execute that in the field. That package needs to go through a workflow. It needs to be managed. There needs to be constraints and approvals tracked against it, activities tracked against it. It needs to move through a status workflow, so real management of that package, reporting and analytics built in around the management of those packages, and lots of automation through those workflows to make that process as efficient as possible. And you'll notice here, I'm not using any specific package names. I'm not talking about installation packages or engineering work packages or procurement work packages. I'm talking generically about work packages, because if you're thinking about AWP, you need these activities across all your package types. And if you're an AWP mature provider, then you're talking about 10 different work package types, whether that's procurement packages, engineering work packages, scaffolding work packages, test work packages. AWP at the most mature levels is much more than just engineering, procurement, construction, and installation. So within O3, in fact, we refer to those packages as XWPs. We talk about them generically because all of these engines, like scheduling and sequencing engines, or visualization engines, or constraint management engines, all those workflow engines that we built into the tool, those apply generically across all those package types. So as we identify opportunities to introduce other package types, they automatically inherit those engines and allow you to leverage that functionality for those specific packages. So really important that you think about AWP as much bigger than just WorkFace planning. It's a project execution methodology, not a construction execution methodology. The other thing we talked about is that if you're doing digital transformation, you really can't do that without mobility, right? So if we want to talk about AWP world where AWP and digital transformation meet, you can't do that without talking about AWP specific mobility. And before we showed the graph where we said, hey, the level of AWP technology is really focused inside of construction, and there outside of that you get into spreadsheets and emails and one-off Power BI solutions. The state of technology is really focused just on that WorkFace planning bit. And the same is true when you look at mobile. In fact, it's even more focused when you talk about mobile. The state of AWP specific solutions is very limited today, and that's one of the things that we wanted to talk about, and we went through and did some brainstorming around that. But before we talked about that, we talked about O3's mobile solutions, which, much like the state of the industry, is focused on the WorkFace planning component. So one of the things that we announced at this conference was the general availability of our on-field solution. And this is where you can use this as a WorkFace planner for doing walkdowns and understanding the development of packages, and you can use this as a foreperson for managing those packages in the field. So accessing the packages, being able to progress those packages, having some access to those drawings, those types of things. So it's really an extension of that on-build solution out into the field. And today, this has been used in beta with a number of clients. Now it is generally available in production use. So excited to announce that this on-field solution is available. This is a purpose-built iOS native iPad app for managing those packages in the field. What's next with this solution? We're extending this to include CWP viewing, live interaction with the model, and live interaction with the drawings, some RFI management, constraint management, approval management, so extending some of that functionality out into the field. And why is that important? Well, it reduces that IDP prep and execution time through automation and digitization. So we were really excited to announce the general availability of the on-field app at this conference, and any of our clients who are using the on-build solution can work with our client success team to get this in place. So having kind of level set our thoughts about the state of technology, the state of mobile technology, we then moved into an AWP roadmap discussion, and we were speaking specifically about where we need to go from a technology perspective. So this isn't, where does AWP need to go in general or from a process perspective, but from a technology perspective. And we came up with a couple of kind of key things, or O3 shared a couple of our views on where the industry needs to go. The first is around making WorkFace planning accessible to all projects. So we want AWP to work for we want WorkFace planning to work for all types of projects, large projects, small projects, different industries of projects, infrastructure projects, other types of projects. We want to make sure that WorkFace planning is accessible, complex projects with lots of different contractual stakeholders. We need WorkFace planning to be widely accessible because WorkFace planning typically is the way that AWP gets its foot in the door, right? So if we can make WorkFace, if we can expand the applicability of WorkFace planning, then ultimately that allows us to expand AWP. The second component that we talked about from a technology perspective was driving AWP value directly to engineering and procurement. So one of the challenges that we see, and I've written blogs on this and spoken a lot about this with CII, is that AWP today, from an engineering perspective, is really asking engineers to change the way that they work in order to benefit the overall system. We know that we get huge value downstream in construction when engineering follows an AWP best practice. But we're saying to engineering, hey, we want you to do something different so that your neighbor downstream can benefit, and ultimately the whole project benefits, and it's the right thing for the project. But we're not talking about or delivering value directly to engineering, or if we are, it's more limited in nature. And so I think that's reflected when we look at the adoption of AWP within engineering and procurement. We see less adoption in engineering and procurement than we do in construction with WorkFace planning. And oftentimes when we do see the adoption in engineering and procurement, it's because they're being instructed to do it because it benefits the overall project. The engineers are not enthusiastically raising their hands and saying, I want to do AWP. I don't care if you're doing WorkFace planning downstream for me. AWP makes sense for me. And that's where we need to get as an industry if we want the level of adoption of AWP in engineering and procurement. We want them to enthusiastically embrace it on their own, regardless of whether construction is going to take advantage of that. And that's not where we are today. And we need to drive that from a technology perspective, enable that from a technology perspective. And then last was to enable digital transformation through AWP-specific mobility. So we need to solve this problem of really limited AWP-specific mobility, extend those AWP-specific solutions so that we can really drive digital transformation. So those are the three things where O3 feels the industry needs to go from a technology perspective to really drive AWP. And so if we're looking first at making WorkFace planning accessible to all projects, there are a number of things that we identified. One is user interface enhancements to simplify AWP development. We need to make the tools easier and easier to use so it's simpler and simpler, because we want to be able to take folks from the field that understand construction, that may not have a background in technology, and be able to make them successful WorkFace planners. We want people to not have to have major technology knowledge. They need to have construction knowledge, and then the technology should be straightforward. Introducing 4D visualizations coupled with AWP management. So today is a really kind of disparate. We have 4D visualizations tools, and then we have AWP management tools. We really need to bring these two together in a single environment so that we can facilitate the sequencing and scheduling, making WorkFace planning even easier. So introducing that visualization component makes it simpler to understand and visualize. Being able to better control and manage the releases of CWPs, and this particularly has to do with larger, more complex projects where you have both the EPC and the subcontractor interacting within the same technology environment. This is important because you need to have the ability to control what the contractors can view when those CWPs are released and available for those contractors to view. By having some more control around that, that facilitates that collaboration within the same environment and makes this WorkFace planning process more applicable on these larger, more complex projects. The data requirements, management, and automation. So one of the real challenges around WorkFace planning is getting all that data in. And one of the things that's real frustrating, if you think about how we manage our data requirements today, we do it in a document-centric way. We have Excel workbooks that we use to manage our data requirements. I mean, think about that. We're taking a document-centric approach to managing our data requirements. We need a data-centric approach to managing our data requirements to allow automation and allow standardization across projects. Enterprise cross-project reporting. So today, WorkFace planning implementations, particularly if you're talking about the kind of archaic, thick client on-premise solutions, they're limited to a single project. With a SaaS solution, you can start to do cross-project reporting and look at it from a programmatic perspective. We need more enterprise cross-project reporting because that's where you start to be able to do that apples to apples comparison across projects. You start to see value at a programmatic level that drives the visibility from the upper management that pushes the adoption of AWP. So more enterprise reporting is critical to making WorkFace planning accessible to all projects, particularly smaller cap projects. And then multidiscipline scaffold management. One of the areas CIIs founded this joint working group looking at scaffold management, but the approach, the definition of best practices is limited. We need to have scaffold being brought into the fold, as well as more generally access management, but there's a huge spend on projects and a huge opportunity for optimization through AWP. And this is important because if we incorporate this, the ROI there is massive, and it contributes significantly to the benefits of WorkFace planning, which then leads to WorkFace planning being driven out onto more projects. So if we really want the WorkFace planning to be driven from the top, you need to show that value, and scaffold is a big low-hanging fruit where we can drive that. The second kind of technology piece we talked about was driving value directly to engineering and procurement when it comes to AWP. So we talked about this briefly, but today we're saying engineering changed the way that you're going to do business because it benefits your brother downstream in construction. Well, we want to say, hey, engineering, do AWP because it's good for you. And in order to do that, we need to do a number of things. One is drawing annotations coupled with constraint management. So this has to do with a vendor document management process today that's really inefficient. So we want to get into this process of this vendor document review. That's a really important part of the procurement process and the engineering process. We need that process to be tied in directly with constraint management and take advantage of that intentional technology-driven constraint management process, similar to model annotations coupled with this. This should be just more generally package prep, not just IDP prep, but similar model annotations coupled directly in with this process. Document workflow management coupled with vendor work package management. So again, the introduction of vendor work packages and the introduction of design work packages, those are two package types that are standard inside of O3 that we developed in conjunction with some AWP mature engineering and procurement providers. That are the intention of those is to take that vendor document management process and that design process and provide AWP value directly to that process by introducing packages for managing scoping and managing and sequencing, managing constraints against that process. It allows us to get the same kind of value that you get in WorkFace planning from moving from a level 3 CWP activity down to a level 4 IDP activity. Now, similarly, inside of engineering and procurement, we have the ability to go from those high-level engineering work packages and procurement work packages down to level 4 activities, where now we can scope and manage that in more bite-sized chunks where you get that real value associated with advanced work packaging. So we want to see the same kind of WorkFace planning value that we see in construction. We want to see that same kind of value inside of engineering and procurement, and enhanced procurement work package workflows. Procurement work packages are an area where some people now even argue that we want to have procurement work process and not procurement work packages. O3 believes there's value in having a package there, but having and showing that through having workflows and automation to drive the value. It's not just a process. By having a package and linking that to other packages, there is a value there. And so by driving value directly to engineering procurement, we can drive adoption around engineering procurement for AWP. And then the last area that we talked about was enabling digital transformation through AWP-specific mobility. And this is where actually we had an interactive session with the participants where we prioritized some of the AWP mobility enhancements to move the industry forward. And again, this is not just things that may or may not be applicable to O3. This was an industry conversation about where things can go. And through that conversation, we identified a number of opportunities for expansion. One is increased IDP management, so that's focused on the foreperson. So how do we provide more value directly to the foreperson? Another was a purpose-built progressing app, so this is more focused on the cost engineer. Third was site walk down for IDP prep, so focused on the WorkFace planner, so mobile solutions. You'll notice each of these mobile solutions is a persona based, so they're not kind of wide open platform solutions. They're more focused and tailored around a specific use case for a persona. Construction management solution for a superintendent doing walkdowns or construction site reviews, a system walkdown for a QC/QA inspector, And then this one, mobile task management for office workers. This is more of a platform solution, but this is basically for any activities that you're responsible for on the project, whether those are constraints or approvals or reviews or whatever those actions are, any of those activities or actions, being able to access those on your mobile device so that you can contribute and participate in those activities even when you're not at your desk. So a more general task management applied into the mobile environment. So those are the ones that we discussed with the group. And ultimately, we found that the most energy was around the IWP management expansion and construction management focused solutions. We weren't surprised by that feedback because, as you remember, most people who are doing AWP really are in the WorkFace planning bucket, so they're earlier on in the journey. So we see a lot of energy around IWPs and around construction management, CWPs. That's where we see the most energy because that's where we see the most engagement today, just from an AWP perspective. The last portion of the day, we did an Inspiration Innovation Interactive Workshop. First thing that we did is we used a tool called Mural, which is it's a great tool for an interactive whiteboarding sessions where you can create sticky notes. So we predefined some areas. We built out what this mural to interact with, and then we had lots of people in a live session creating and moving around sticky notes. It's really awesome to see that happen. And what we asked people to do was to brainstorm challenges associated with the adoption of technology in these various phases of a project. So you can notice front-end planning, engineering, procurement, those are phases of a project. We also added a getting started with AWP to capture those things that maybe are preventing people from adopting technology who are just getting started on their AWP journey. Ultimately, we captured those brainstorm ideas all over the place, and then we took those, the subject matter experts came in during a break, and we grouped those into general themes, which are those larger pink items that you see. We brought them down into the next section there, and then we had all the participants vote on which ones of those that they felt were the most important for us to address. Through that voting process, we came out with 3 that we wanted to focus on. So data management and deliverables in engineering, the lack of connection between materials management solutions and AWP during construction, and then the cost of AWP software and ROI justification in the getting started phase. So those were the 3 that received the most energy out of the, we had hundreds and hundreds of challenges. We grouped those down into about 30 or so general kind of themes, and then voted on those 30 and came with those 3 that had the most energy. And then we did a separate session where we then opened it back up and brainstormed about solutions for each of those prioritized challenges, again, using the Mural interface. And we came out with a couple of things that were potential solutions. So incorporating additional data standards into AWP data standards, so kind of connecting those two or integrating those two, better integration of engineering data interfaces with other systems, enabling request of materials in the virtual construction model, so moving the request process from materials management into the AWP or WorkFace planning solution, better linking of AWP software platforms, standard integrations. On the ROI side, more scalable solutions, and then also modular solutions, so being able to bite off just smaller pieces of AWP so that your costs can align with the value and the level of AWP that you're deploying. So we grouped all those together and summarized then at the end and had an open discussion, which was really a powerful conversation between the participants about really where we need to go as an industry. And some of these things are things that O3 is going to take and incorporate into our roadmap, and some of the other technology providers who participated will do the same. But really excited to be kind of having this open discussion and moving this process forward. So coming out of that, a couple of conclusions and key takeaways from the day. First, AWP is a journey, so you need to think about it as a journey. A lot of folks are early in that and just getting started, but you need to have a plan and a process for implementing additional expansion of AWP as you grow along your journey. And technology can meet you where you are, and you should implement technology early in that journey. Don't wait, don't do double change management. Start small, get value in the beginning, get a quick win, and then build on that and grow as you grow in your AWP maturity. Constraint management alone can get you value. So that's a simple way to get in the door with an AWP best practice that's really critical and drives a lot of value. You're doing constraint management today, you're probably just doing it in a disconnected, discombobulated way. You want to just be intentional about that. You want to use a tool You want to have real management, not just a checklist. You need to have accountability, visibility, and transparency into that. And so that's a great place to get started. Another kind of key piece there, full AWP requires a solution from concept through commissioning. So AWP is not a construction execution methodology. WorkFace planning is a small subset of AWP. If you want to do AWP correctly, you're talking about the entire project lifecycle, and that's both from a best practices process perspective as well as a technology perspective. If you are doing AWP correctly, you have purpose-built technology solutions for each phase of the project with regards to AWP. It's not just a WorkFace planning tool and some spreadsheets, duct tape, and Band-Aids. And then lastly, AWP-specific mobility is critical to AWP-enabled digital transformation. So if you want to transform your organization and embrace digital, there needs to be additional AWP-specific mobility solutions. As an industry, we need to go there. Today, including within O3, those AWP-specific mobility solutions are limited, and they're really focused on the construction side. We need to expand that. They're really focused on the four-person, really replacing the printed PDF, and we think the industry needs to change that. O3 is committed to changing that. We hope all of our other solution providers who make up the collective industry are also committed to that. And then lastly, we really valued everyone's input and thanked everyone for participating in this event. It was really exciting and valuable to O3, and we hope it was valuable from an industry perspective. Then we shared a couple of different ways that people can interact. We have both an AWP health assessment and an ROI calculator available on O3's website. That ROI calculator is a very simple one, but we have a much more complicated, robust ROI calculator that as we work with projects, we can help them to build business cases. It's in O3's interest for folks to have a strong business case for why AWP should be deployed on projects, so we provide that support to our clients and prospects. And then we also just provided a couple of different ways that people can interact. Same for folks here today. You can visit our website, o3.solutions, where you can get additional resources and access to this additional information, including our webinar series, and this recap itself will be available through that interface as well. So with that, Stephen, I'd like to open it up and see if we have any questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Josh. That was obviously a lot of great information came out of the exchange, the AWPXChange event, and I'm curious if anybody that's online right now on this webinar actually attended the AWPXChange, and if they'd be willing to share some of their highlights and thoughts from that event, and let us know whether or not they have any kind of outstanding questions after that event. I'm curious, will the AWPXChange be a reoccurring event, Josh?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously this was a test, a first of this event of its kind, but was extremely successful. So lots of participation, really active, both in terms of registration and then participation in the interactive sessions. So absolutely will be a recurring event. You know, I think we'll at least twice a year. We may be doing some smaller events also, but this was really effective session. I think it moved the industry forward from a conversation perspective. And then we also realized one thing in this event was because it's interactive, you know, we need to host it in different time zones as well, because AWP is global, and so the time zones weren't convenient for Asia Pac, for example. So some of the later sessions, we lost some participation from some folks who are in different time zones. So we also intend to offer it in multiple time zones.
That makes sense. Yeah, we've seen obviously a similar effect with some of our virtual events that were going global. So yeah, okay, that's great to hear. So we'll watch for more information about upcoming events. I think that it's really great that you're willing to share all these learnings with the industry at large, because it's really in the spirit of what we're doing with the AWP community of practice in terms of sharing knowledge and just helping advance overall the construction industry and the best practices and around project performance worldwide. So speaking of best practices, obviously AWP and WFP originally in the early 2000s developed with an eye toward primarily oil and gas projects, especially, of course, with WorkFace Planning being a Construction Owners Association of Alberta initiative, and the Alberta market being heavily focused on oil and gas. Now, all these years later, obviously we've gotten much deeper. The AWPXChange is a great example of, just how in depth we've gotten, and how, of course, now the shift toward digitization and digital construction and all of these data concepts becoming more and more of interest. I think it shows how mature all of this has become. Aside from oil and gas, where are you seeing interest in AWP, and where do you see this going in terms of new sectors around the world?
Yeah, great question. So obviously chemical, which people may lump in with oil and gas, is another area where we see lots of AWP adoption. But then outside of those, we see power, mining and metals, infrastructure. We're seeing now also data centers. So I think infrastructure is an area for a huge amount of opportunity for expansion, particularly with a focus on infrastructure. We think this is going to happen, particularly from some of the things coming out of the U.S. in terms of infrastructure bills. And then data centers are obviously an area with lots of growth. So excited about both of those, and power, with some of the major oil and gas companies now looking to diversify and focus more on power. We see lots of power projects, new energy projects, something I actually spoke about at the AWP Europe conference, seeing the adoption of AWP within these kind of new energies divisions within some of these traditional fossil fuel oil and gas providers that are making a shift to diversify some of their revenue streams. So definitely seeing an expansion and a rapid expansion into other industries, and we're excited to see that.
Definitely, yes. We've got CII has been looking at obviously a number of different sectors, and with our partnership, we're hoping to present a number of various events focused on some of those sectors you mentioned, infrastructure, power, to try and get those sectors up to speed with AWP. Of course, it's going to be a learning curve for some that are new to it, but I think it's I would agree that it does seem to be going into those areas, and hopefully we'll see that sooner than later. So you mentioned mobility in your presentation just now, and one question I have, which is kind of general, but do you think the market is ready for mobile AWP solutions? Are we there yet?
I do. There's a couple of things that have been slowing the adoption of mobility solutions. Obviously, one is in brownfield environments, intrinsically safe is an issue, and then access to network can be an issue on some sites as well. So we can address the latter with offline mode. So O3 Solutions offers, our mobile solutions offer offline mode to be able to operate without network and then sync that data later. With regards to intrinsically safe, we are seeing some advancements on the hardware side and some of the cases side to make that more available. But those are more kind of hardware limitations that we think are largely being addressed. There's also the challenges around the readiness for just the introduction of extending these solutions out into the field. And I think the answer to that is, from a culture perspective, I think the answer to that is yes. We are seeing that. We're seeing the generation of folks that are in place today are expecting that. 10, 15 years ago, you may have said, okay, the demographics don't support this, but now all the folks that are working on a construction site all have iPhones. They anticipate and they expect, they've got iPads at home. They anticipate or expect to have some mobile solutions in their workplace as well. So I think from a culture perspective, we're there. I think from a technology or hardware perspective, we're there, getting there as well.
Yeah, and I think your note about the the future generation, the future leaders coming up, they're going to have an expectation around technology, and if it's not there to meet them, it's going to slow us down. So okay, well, we are at the end of our time. I just want to say thank you once again for putting this session on, for organizing the AWPXChange. As always, very informative and very insightful to hear from you. And I think if everybody just keeps an eye on the emails coming from the AWP community of practice, you will find more content from O3 down the road. Obviously, Josh did mention that O3 has their own webinar series that we encourage you to follow as well. We mentioned at the top of the hour there are additional free webinars, premium events like AWP conferences and summits coming up. And of course, training is available now in the market. Talk to either Group ASI or O3 Solutions for information about that and to kind of lead you in the right direction if you are interested in certification. But yeah, I think we'll leave it at that. I'll leave it to Josh to close us out. But just want to say thanks to everybody for joining us this week for another AWP Community of Practice webinar. Josh?
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate everyone coming today, and appreciate everyone taking some time to learn a little bit more about the AWPXChange, and we hope to see you at the next event. So thank you.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. Take care, everyone. Be safe.